The first warning came as a flicker in the night sky, barely noticeable to anyone except a handful of amateur astronomers who lived for this sort of anomaly. To them, it was just an odd blip, a drifting light inconsistent with satellite paths or meteor trajectories. To the rest of the world, it didn't matter. Humanity was busy, scrolling, arguing, working, binge-watching, surviving. A strange star blinking once didn't register. 12 hours later, it was impossible to ignore. Every major satellite feed was overridden. Television channels, phone screens, smart fridges, baby monitors, all hijacked by the same feed. A golden-skinned being with multiple symmetrical eyes and teeth too white to be trusted stared down at Earth, flanked by an alien honor guard with matching smug expressions and ceremonial laser spears. "People of Earth," the being announced in perfect English, though his accent suggested he'd been raised on a steady diet of Shakespeare and self-importance. "I am Admiral Snarthax of a glorious Horvath Empire. Your planet has been selected for cleansing and eventual integration into our supreme order. Submit peacefully, or be eradicated swiftly. You have one rotation of your planet to decide." The transmission ended, replaced by a countdown timer. 24 hours, ticking down across every screen in existence. Reactions were swift and wildly inconsistent. The United Nations convened an emergency session. World leaders, sweating under studio lights, tried to present calm while their assistants Googled how to negotiate with aliens in real time. In some countries, officials blamed NATO. In capital, the president fainted mid-press conference and was replaced by the vice president, who promptly promised a sternly worded email. And in Florida, a retired Navy SEAL named Chuck McKenzie blinked up from his fishing boat, flipped open a cooler, and cracked a beer. "Well," he muttered, watching the glowing countdown on his phone screen, "looks like it's open season." Chuck wasn't a man of many words. Not since the Battle of Fallujah. Not since that one mission in Caracas that everyone still refused to talk about. Not since he decided the world was too stupid to be worth fighting for. He traded his rifle for a rod and reel, his buzz cut for a shaggy gray mane, and opened meat grinders bait and tackle on the Gulf Coast. He hadn't planned on returning to action. But the moment an alien with the fashion sense of a Vegas lounge singer threatened Earth, something in him stirred, something primal, caffeinated, and slightly vengeful. Meanwhile, the rest of the planet did what humans do best: panic, meme, and adapt. Twitter exploded. Memes of Admiral Snarthax holding a cat. TikToks of people reenacting the alien ultimatum with sock puppets. Facebook groups titled "We Stand with Earth" launched conspiracy theories ranging from the Horvath are lizard people to "this is just a government psyop to distract from inflation." A high school senior in Arizona filmed herself slapping her television during the alien broadcast and posted it under the hashtag #AlienSlapChallenge. It went viral within minutes. Then came hashtag #NoProbeZone and the inevitable flood of Etsy shop selling "come and take it" t-shirts with ray guns. The Horvath were confused. This was not how Earthlings were supposed to react. Admiral Snarthax, who had never once lost a planetary invasion, paced across the command deck of his flagship, the Radiant Extinction, gnashing his diamond-edged teeth. "They're laughing at us," he muttered. Beside him, Subcommander Druin looked equally horrified, tapping through surveillance feeds. "Our cultural intelligence team said they would be terrified, that they have rudimentary weapons and fragmented leadership. They threw a boot at one of our envoys in Detroit," Druin added with a tremble, and then chanted something called USA while dancing around a burning trash can. Snarthax turned sharply. "Initiate the invasion. Begin with a tactical strike in their most dangerous quadrant. Show them our wrath." The location was chosen after reviewing intercepted Earth broadcasts, footage that included heavily edited clips from Walker, Texas Ranger, WWE SmackDown, and Cops. Target acquired, an officer announced. Texas. What followed would enter galactic military history as one of the most humiliating defeats ever recorded. 3 sleek invasion craft descended upon the small Texas town of Parker's Bluff, lights blazing, sonic cannons armed. They expected surrender. They got Buck Rollins. Buck, a former rodeo champion and proud owner of Buck's Ammo and Gator Jerky, was repairing a barbed wire fence when the first ship hovered above his pasture. He squinted up, spat tobacco juice, and muttered, "Well, I'll be damned. The meth heads have really stepped it up." The aliens disembarked, speaking in booming tones through universal translators. Buck's cattle scattered. Buck himself didn't move. He walked to the back of his truck, pulled out a modified AR-15 with a chainsaw bayonet, legal in Texas, naturally, and opened fire. He missed every shot, but the sound alone caused the Horvath to retreat behind their energy shields. They hadn't expected noise. They hadn't expected the locals to charge their landing struts with pickup trucks playing Lynyrd Skynyrd at full volume. Within 30 minutes, the invasion fleet was limping back to orbit with injuries ranging from bullet grazes to emotional trauma. One soldier had been bitten by a chihuahua. Another was still screaming about the shirtless man on a horse with 2 flamethrowers. Snarthax demanded a report. He got one. It contained words like feral, unpredictable, and we believe they weaponized their kitchen appliances. But the invasion didn't stop. The Horvath were too proud, or too stupid. They tried New York next. The ship that landed in the Bronx was immediately spray-painted, robbed of its alloy plating, and towed by a guy named Vinny, who claimed it was parked illegally. In California, aliens attempted to subdue Los Angeles using psychic dampening fields. They were overwhelmed by unpaid extras who believed it was an audition for a new Marvel movie. In Canada, an alien diplomat was given poutine, politely thanked, and then beaten senseless with hockey sticks after asking if maple syrup was a fuel source. The countdown ended. Humanity did not surrender. Chuck McKenzie stood in his bait shop, eyes fixed on the grainy feed of alien ships retreating into orbit. He was already wearing his old combat boots. The coffee in his thermos steamed like a war cry. A local teenager burst into the shop, breathless. "Mr. McKenzie, they're attacking again." They hit a Walmart outside Pensacola. Chuck sipped his coffee, set it down, and opened a dusty locker in the back room. Inside were weapons the government had technically told him to destroy. Behind the weapons was a photograph of his old unit. Above it hung his motto, "Some things just need killing." He looked at the kid. "Tell the sheriff I'm borrowing the Humvee, and to stay out of my way." The teen blinked. "You have a Humvee?" Chuck didn't answer. He was already outside, fishing vest fluttering in the breeze, shotgun slung over his shoulder like it belonged there. He wasn't the only one. Across the country, across the world, people were stepping up, not in coordinated military fashion, but as individuals, families, weirdos, rednecks, hackers, pranksters, and retirees with suspicious sheds. Humanity's real strength wasn't unity. It was chaos. It was audacity. It was the unshakable belief that no matter what was coming, we could probably punch it, taste it, or confuse it into submission. The Horvath had brought hell, but they hadn't planned on what came next. Because Earth wasn't scared. Earth was pissed. And Earth was loading up. Out in space, on the bridge of the radiant extinction, Admiral Snarthax watched the screen flicker once more. A human broadcast had somehow overridden their encryption protocols. It was a video clip, grainy, handheld, clearly filmed on a potato. In the footage, Chuck McKenzie stood in front of a pickup truck, cigar between his teeth, holding a shotgun and wearing mirrored sunglasses. He grinned. "Y'all wanted a war," he said. "Guess it's open season." And then he fired. The screen went black. The countdown was over. Let the hunting begin. Admiral Snarthax stared blankly at the tactical readouts, his many eyes twitching in disbelief. Charts predicted victory in 30 minutes. Instead, losses were mounting faster than their fleet's auto-repair nanites could handle. Whole squads were returning with concussions, bite wounds, and reports of being bombarded by things like slushies and microwaved fish burritos. He activated the holoprojector with a frustrated flick of his clawed finger. A rotating 3D image of Earth floated serenely in the air. Innocent. Mocking. "We underestimated them," Subcommander Druin admitted reluctantly. His tentacle trembled slightly as he adjusted his sash. "Their responses are outside the realm of logic. Incomprehensible." "Incomprehensible is unacceptable," Snarthax hissed. "They threw a jar of pickles at our forward unit in Chicago." Pickles. Their civilians are engaging our soldiers in hand-to-hand combat using garden gnomes and lawn furniture. Did the recon team not report this planet as primitive? Yes, Admiral. Primitive and disorganized. They're using fireworks as weapons. Snarthax swiped at the holoprojector, causing Earth to spin wildly. He muttered under his breath in Horvaki, something untranslatable but widely understood among his officers as, "How are they this ridiculous?" He took a deep breath. "Fine. We escalate. Mobilize the quantum phalanx. I want full deployment over their most dangerous stronghold." Droon hesitated. "The data indicates that would be New Jersey." Snarthax blinked. "New Jersey? What kind of name is New Jersey?" "We're still translating it. Early indicators suggest it's a land of chaos and unforgivable driving practices." "So be it. Deploy the fleet." What followed was less an invasion and more an ambush by entropy. Horvath assault cruisers landed in Newark, Camden, and the surrounding areas, expecting resistance. What they received was barely organized madness. One squad was nearly run over by a souped-up Honda Civic blasting Bon Jovi at max volume. Another was overwhelmed by a flash mob of teenagers who mistook the aliens for a viral marketing campaign. When the Horvath tried to regroup, they were hit by a garbage truck repurposed as a battering ram. Worse, locals began hacking into the Horvath comms, jamming transmissions with soundbites from The Sopranos, and someone yelling, "AY, I'm walking here." A Horvath captain tried to set up a command post inside a convenience store. The clerk, unfazed, asked if they wanted to sign up for the rewards program before tasering him with a stun gun disguised as a vape pen. As footage of the New Jersey debacle streamed back to the radiant extinction, Admiral Snarthax felt his bowels, a cluster of retractable organs near his thoracic sac, begin to clench with unease. "Status report?" he asked flatly. "They have repurposed their public transportation into assault vehicles. I believe they call them battle buses." Snarthax rubbed his face with all four hands. "Do they even have a centralized military?" "Not really. But they have a militia of something called gamers who have weaponized drones, 3D printers, and memes." The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Back on Earth, Chuck McKenzie crouched beside the rusted hull of a crashed alien skimmer, cleaning his shotgun with a piece of his flannel shirt. Around him, a ragtag crew of civilians was gearing up. A former librarian named Beth wielding a baseball bat with nails in it. A 17-year-old hacker called Keyboard Kev with a backpack full of makeshift signal jammers, and Sergeant Lyle Jackson, an ex-Marine with a prosthetic leg and a vendetta against anything with tentacles. "We've taken down 3 landers so far," Beth said, tightening the grip on her bat. "We've got the edge. What's next?" Chuck glanced at the sky, where a Horvath cruiser hovered, occasionally belching out sparks like it was reconsidering its entire life. "We go weird," he replied. "We go real weird." Across the country, people had already caught on. This wasn't a war to be fought by the book. It was improv. Jazz with bullets. A cooking show where the main ingredient was alien defeat. Humans didn't play fair. They played loud, played dirty, and didn't stop for permission. In Los Angeles, a collective of stunt drivers and film crew veterans set up decoys that mimicked major military installations, using cardboard, green screens, and unpaid interns. When Horvath ground troops moved in expecting resistance, they were lured into hot zones rigged with paintball guns, fireworks, and voice lines from Predator. In Wisconsin, an elderly quilting circle developed thermally insulated cloaks that blocked the Horvath's heat signatures, by accident, while trying to make holiday throws. In Seattle, a punk band armed with modified speakers blasted sonic frequencies that caused Horvath equilibrium disruptors to backfire. Several alien units were seen tumbling down hills, screeching like malfunctioning coffee grinders. Chaos, pure and unfiltered, was Earth's greatest weapon. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council, composed of a dozen advanced species who operated on logic, diplomacy, and heavily structured hierarchy, was growing increasingly distressed. They'd watched Earth's rebellion unfold like a fever dream, unable to make sense of what they were seeing. "They weaponized cheese," the ambassador from the Tridar Collective reported, his voice shaking. "It was melted, confirmed another. Thrown with purpose and heat. We've received footage of a human performing a ritual known as the worm before drop-kicking one of our diplomatic aides. A gelatinous member of the KLYRN Confederacy burbled nervously. They do not fear death. They mock it. They celebrate it with snacks and sarcasm. Perhaps we overstepped, murmured the Zarn delegate, adjusting its monocle. They outnumber us? No. They outgun us? Also no. They outtech us? Not even remotely. Then why are we losing? A long silence followed. Because they don't follow the rules, someone whispered. And they don't have a leash. On Earth, the fight was entering its next phase. Chuck McKenzie stood in front of a commandeered Horvath hover truck, its hull now spray-painted with a crudely drawn bald eagle riding a shark. His team had turned the truck bed into a mobile command post, complete with walkie-talkies, explosives, and a cooler of soda. "We've got 2 dropships coming in low over the ridge," reported Kev, peering at his laptop. "We jammed their guidance, but they're still on approach." Chuck nodded. "Then we greet 'em Southern style." Sergeant Jackson grinned. "With barbecue and gunpowder?" "Exactly. They lay traps. Not mines. Those were predictable." Instead, Chuck had deployed inflatable tube men from a defunct car dealership, rigged with tasers. The aliens landed into a writhing mess of electrified, flailing, and screaming colors. Panic ensued. As the Horvath regrouped, Chuck and Beth flanked them, using slingshots loaded with bags of powdered wasabi and glitter. Blinded and wheezing, the invaders collapsed one by one. The battle ended in 13 minutes. Afterward, the team sat around the campfire, roasting hot dogs over the wreckage of a Horvath plasma core. "You ever think this is insane?" Beth asked, sipping warm soda. "Of course," Chuck said. "But if we were sane, we'd have lost already. Is it true you took down a dropship using a fishing rod?" "Technically, it got tangled in the line. I just didn't let go." Keyboard Kev looked up. "You think we'll win?" Chuck stared into the fire, his face illuminated by the flickering red glow. "We're not supposed to win," he said finally. "Not by their rules. But this isn't their game anymore. It's ours. And we play dirty." Above them, the stars pulsed faintly, cold and unaware. But somewhere just beyond the orbit of Mars, the Horvath fleet floated in silence. Admiral Snarthax sat alone in his chamber, watching replay footage of their most recent defeat. A single human girl had charged into a fortified position on a skateboard, yelling something about Mountain Dew and glory, before tossing a lit firecracker into the command console. The entire outpost went dark. He sighed. Perhaps logic is a handicap. Outside, the bridge officers murmured among themselves, uncertain. A new plan was forming. Something desperate. Something final. But even Snarthax knew, somewhere in the recesses of his battle-hardened mind, that logic might no longer apply. Not when fighting humans. Not when facing chaos incarnate. And certainly not when the next Earth transmission arrived, displaying a burning effigy of a Horvath flag surrounded by dancing mascots from fast food chains. A single line scrolled across the feed. "Guess what, space boys? We're just getting warmed up." Snarthax closed his eyes. This wasn't an invasion anymore. It was survival. The stars no longer felt safe. Where once the Horvath fleet had loomed over Earth in gleaming formation, casting long shadows of impending conquest, now it drifted ragged, bleeding plasma and ego in equal measure. Ships limped through orbit like bruised leviathans, half their hulls patched with emergency plating, sensor arrays jammed with Earth's chaotic data streams. The war, which had begun as a galactic footnote, was spiraling into an unprecedented disaster. Admiral Snarthax stood motionless in the command chamber of a radiant extinction, his cape draped limply over one shoulder, eyes fixed on the endless feed of failures flooding the holoscreens. He had stopped asking for status reports. Each new update only confirmed what his gut, an organ in Horvath biology, located somewhere between the lungs and shame gland, already knew. The humans were winning, not through strength or strategy, through sheer, incomprehensible madness. "Admiral," croaked Subcommander Druin from behind him. Scouting reports confirm that humans have reverse-engineered one of our dropships. Snarthax didn't turn. They don't have the cognitive foundation for that. They can't even agree on the shape of their own planet. I'm afraid they've bypassed standard procedure. How? They fed the ship Mountain Dew and used jumper cables and, apparently, a motivational speech. Snarthax blinked. Droon continued nervously. They've rebranded the vessel. They call it the Freedom Wagon. In that moment, Admiral Snarthax understood something deep, something primal. He was no longer in command of an invasion. He was prey. And the hunters had declared open season. The Freedom Wagon hurtled through low orbit, a flaming comet of chaos, trailing glitter, duct tape, and patriotic music. Inside, Chuck McKenzie leaned back in the pilot's chair. Well, technically an upturned lawn chair bolted into place, gnawing on a Slim Jim and eyeing the control panel, most of which was labeled in Sharpie. "Steering's a little janky," he muttered. "Kev, how's that cloaking doodad holding?" Keyboard Kev, sitting on a milk crate next to a pile of cables, gave a thumbs up. "Still running on PlayStation power. Just don't fly near anything with Bluetooth, it interferes." In the back, Beth sharpened her nail bat, while Sergeant Jackson cleaned a collection of salvaged alien weapons, humming bad to the bone. The interior smelled like burnt ozone and barbecue sauce. "This is how we're taking the fight to M?" Beth asked, raising a brow. "Yup," Chuck replied without looking. "They brought hell. We brought snacks and attitude." The first target was a Horvath orbital relay, part command post, part propaganda broadcaster. It floated like a dark monolith above the Pacific, broadcasting threats in 72 languages and playing endless loops of eerie alien music meant to instill fear. Most humans had muted it and set it as their ringtone. The Freedom Wagon didn't bother with stealth. Chuck roared in at full thrust, blasting Free Bird from external speakers. Alarms flared across the relay. Horvath troopers scrambled to battle stations, only to be hit with an EMP pulse rigged from a microwave, a car battery, and what might have once been a Game Boy. The ship cut power to the station instantly. Chuck and crew boarded through an emergency vent, weapons raised, expressions unbothered. They moved like a garage band breaking into their own concert, casual and efficient. Resistance was minimal. The aliens were confused, half-blinded, and suffering mild concussions from the sonic assault. Beth lobbed a smoke grenade made from repurposed vape pens. Sergeant Jackson disabled the auto turrets with a taser and a deep, menacing glare. In 10 minutes, the relay was under human control. Chuck stood in the control center, staring at the main broadcast terminal. A massive camera hovered overhead, blinking red. He smirked, cracked his neck, and stepped into frame. "Attention, Galaxy," he said, lighting a cigar. "You've heard the warnings. You've seen the chaos. And if you're still watching, that means you haven't learned. So here it is, plain and simple. It's open season. And guess what? We're doing the hunting now." He raised a middle finger, then hit the switch to broadcast static on every Horvath channel. Back on the radiant extinction, the bridge crew watched the feed cut to black. Snarthax did not speak. Droon hesitated. "Should we counterattack?" The Admiral's voice was low. "How do you counter madness?" As word of the human assault spread through the Galactic Council, fear began to replace disdain. The humans had seized a warship, a communications relay, and had begun uploading what they called educational programming into the galactic data stream. So far, transmissions included an episode of MacGyver, a monster truck rally, and an instructional video on making grilled cheese with a clothes iron. Alien diplomats scrambled to assess the damage. The humans hadn't just defied expectation, they dismantled it and used the pieces to build a flamethrower. The council convened an emergency session. The squid-like ambassador from Gorwin wept openly into a glass of nutrient fluid. "They broadcasted Die Hard," he sobbed. "Without context. I thought it was a documentary." "They're unhinged," muttered another. "They've got no strategy, no central leadership. It's like fighting a hurricane made of glitter and sarcasm." In the midst of this spiral, Chuck and his crew continued their offensive. Target after target fell, not through precision strikes or superior firepower, but through creative, chaotic ambushes. Human teams repurposed carnival rides into kinetic launchers, used leaf blowers to disperse anti-gravity mines, and tricked Horvath AI systems into self-sabotage by uploading endless loops of knock-knock jokes. In one notable encounter, a group of second-grade teachers in Kansas constructed a decoy base out of papier-mâché and anxiety. When the Horvath landed, they were lured into an educational trap involving pop quizzes, glitter bombs, and a puppet named Colonel Sparkles. Not a single alien escaped with dignity intact. The Horvath Empire, once feared across 7 spiral arms, was collapsing under the weight of one hard truth. Humans were terrifying because they were ridiculous, not bound by logic, not constrained by protocol, driven by impulse, caffeine, and spite. And for every ship lost, for every ground force humiliated, for every failed counterstrike, a new resistance cell popped up, scrappier, stranger, and more determined than the last. Snarthax's own crew began whispering doubts. Officers requested transfers to quieter corners of the galaxy. Soldiers faked injuries. Engineers pretended not to speak Horvathi when asked to repair weapons. Droon noticed it first. "Sir," he said gently, "perhaps we should consider a ceasefire?" Snarthax turned slowly, eyes dark. "Do you think they want peace?" "I think they want to be left alone." Snarthax's jaw flexed. "We gave them the galaxy's finest threat, and they turned it into a sport." He walked to the viewport, watching Earth spin below. The pale blue marble looked innocent again. But he knew what lay beneath those clouds. They hadn't invaded a planet. They'd trespassed into a madhouse. Back aboard the Freedom Wagon, Chuck sat cross-legged in the ship's hold, surrounded by alien parts and human snacks. He was quiet, thoughtful, even as Beth argued with Kev about whether the Horvath armor could be turned into a grill. Jackson leaned beside him, folding his arms. "You think we've gone too far?" Chuck exhaled, watching smoke curl toward the ceiling. "Too far? We haven't even hit the halfway point. We're punching above our weight." "No. They just don't understand the weight class we fight in." There was a pause. Distant stars blinked outside the viewport. "You think they'll give up?" Jackson asked. "They'll think about it," Chuck said. "But if they don't?" He stood, grabbing a can of spray paint, and scrawled across the wall in bold, angry letters, "This ain't Earth's first rodeo." Then he looked at his crew, oddballs, survivors, warriors of the absurd. "Gear up," he said. "We've got more hunting to do." And the Freedom Wagon roared back into the void, a misfit war cry echoing across the stars. The galaxy had unleashed hell. Now it was learning what happened when humanity stopped laughing and started fighting back. Galactic broadcasts once filled the stars with diplomatic decrees and warnings, with proclamations of power from the great empires that carved space into neatly labeled sectors. Now the most watched transmission was a shaky handheld video of a bearded man in mirrored sunglasses blowing up a Horvath gunship with a rigged propane tank while screaming, "Yeehaw, mother-loving space bugs." The universe had changed. The Galactic Council, once a stoic assembly of ancient and proud civilizations, now trembled behind hastily erected planetary shields. They'd sent their strongest, their smartest, their genetically perfected warriors, armed with logic, science, and centuries of order. And Earth, chaotic, cluttered, backward Earth, had humiliated them with bottle rockets, sarcasm, and truck-mounted railguns powered by sheer spite. Admiral Snarthax no longer wore his ornamental sash. He had removed it quietly, one clawed finger at a time, and folded it into a drawer he no longer opened. There were rumors among his crew that he'd begun wearing human clothes in private, cargo pants, no less, and shoes with flame decals. He stood at the center of the radiant extinction, once the flagship of galactic terror, now the last fortress of a crumbling empire. His eyes were hollow. His mouth, once so quick to deliver threats, barely moved when he spoke. "They are not at war with us," he muttered. "They are enjoying themselves." Sub-Commander Droon approached, visibly wilted. "Sir, our outer colonies have begun negotiating peace with Earth's representatives." Snarthax scoffed. "Earth doesn't have representatives." They have barbecue competitions and roller derby teams. Yes, the delegation from the Orion Fringe was defeated in both. The Admiral's knuckles tightened against the command console. What do they want, Druin? What is their price for stopping? They asked for unfettered access to alien memes, a lifetime supply of novelty soda, and a holiday named after someone called Florida Man. Snarthax's head dropped. We underestimated them, not because they're smarter, but because they're utterly, gloriously unpredictable. While the Horvax scrambled to retain even a shadow of their influence, humanity surged forward like a wildfire with a flamethrower. Chuck McKenzie and his crew weren't just hunting, they were becoming myths. The Freedom Wagon tore through star systems like a low-orbit thunderstorm. Planet after planet welcomed them not with resistance, but with awe. Human graffiti had begun appearing on alien structures, stylized eagles, catchphrases, tributes to a world no longer mocked but feared. On one moon, a statue had already been erected, a crude but enthusiastic sculpture of Chuck, holding a shotgun in one hand and a fishing pole in the other, standing atop a defeated Horvac battle droid. Chuck himself stared at the thing in silence. Beth laughed. That is the ugliest thing I've ever seen. Gotta say, Sergeant Jackson grinned, they really captured your jawline. Keyboard Kev took a selfie with it, captioning it. Legend mode, unlocked. Chuck didn't speak. He walked to the base of the statue, lit a cigar, and laid down a battered name tag. It was old, bent, still legible. Corporal R. Jensen, Kia. Beth knelt beside him, her humor quieted. He was one of yours? Chuck nodded. Long time ago. Good soldier. Smart. We got hit bad. I made it out. He didn't. He stood again, squinting into the alien horizon. Never thought I'd get to make it matter. The silence that followed was reverent. Not just for the man memorialized, but for every loss that came before. Humanity's rage hadn't been born of vengeance. It had been born of memory. Meanwhile, on the galactic stage, Earth's position transformed from pest to power. Not through treaties or diplomatic maneuvering, but through sheer, undeniable dominance. Alien species that had once scoffed at Earth's erratic nature now sought to imitate it. Training programs in planetary defense academies began incorporating human simulation exercises. These included randomized chaos drills, unpredictable insult tolerance, and advanced sarcasm decoding. One alien world held a human culture festival, featuring hot dog eating contests, demolition derby recreations, and a breakdancing competition that ended in 3 concussions and 1 interstellar truce. The shift was complete. Humanity was no longer the underdog. They were the wild card, the cautionary tale. And still, Chuck pushed forward. News came that the Drakkar, a warrior species with a reputation for brutal conquest, had been watching silently from deep space, gauging Earth's resilience. Rumor had it they were preparing their own invasion. They'll come for us, Jackson said. Sooner or later. Chuck cracked his neck. Then we'll meet them halfway. They headed for the Drakkar frontier, gathering allies along the way, not with promises, but with proof. Former enemy factions joined them, inspired by Earth's impossible victories. A caravan of misfits, warriors, and pranksters followed the Freedom Wagon, united not by bloodlines, but by the thrill of the absurd. As they crossed the boundary into Drakkar space, the crew braced for war. What they found instead was silence. A transmission blinked through. Grainy. Desperate. A Drakkar emissary appeared on screen, visibly shaken. We surrender, the alien said, nervously glancing over its shoulder. We were monitoring your world's social rituals. We came across footage of a being known as Florida Man. Is this your leader? Chuck blinked slowly. Beth coughed into her sleeve to hide her laugh. Sure, Chuck said, straight-faced. He leads the Eastern Territories. The Drakkar emissary paled. We will send a fruit basket. Please, tell Florida Man we mean no disrespect. The transmission cut. Silence hung in the ship's command deck for a long moment. Then Kev whispered, I think we just won a war by existing. Chuck exhaled slowly, as if releasing 30 years of tension in a single breath. Maybe it's time we go home. They turned the ship around, blazing a trail back toward Earth, a planet now mythologized by the stars. When they returned, the world had changed. A crowd greeted them, humans and aliens both. News crews, children waving flags, veterans in old uniforms, punk bands playing distorted anthems. Chuck stepped off the ship into a roar of cheers, his boots crunching over confetti and alien petals. He didn't smile. Not yet. Beth walked beside him, elbowing him lightly. "You're basically the god of weird space now. You ready for that?" "I was barely ready for retirement," he muttered. Jackson shook his head. "You earned this." Kev lifted his phone. "You're trending again. #LegendDad." Chuck chuckled. "Just once." They led the crowd down the spaceport ramp, through the flags and lights and shouting, toward the rebuilt center of Earth's new Galactic Affairs hub. At its entrance stood a gleaming plaque, freshly engraved. "We came in peace. You pushed. We pushed back. Now we drink." Underneath, dedicated to all who fought the stupidest, craziest, most glorious war the galaxy never saw coming. Chuck read the words, then stepped into the building behind them. Inside, the bar had already opened. It wasn't official, but everyone knew it was his. Neon lights buzzed over the polished countertop. The sign above read, "The Grizzled Nebula." Chuck dropped into a stool, cigar dangling from his mouth, and nodded to the bartender, a three-eyed alien who wore a cowboy hat with confidence. "Start tab," Chuck said. "We're going to be here a while." "Name." "Put it under Florida Man." The place erupted in laughter. As the first drinks poured and the stars twinkled beyond Earth's orbit, one thing was clear. The hunters had become the legends. And anyone thinking of trying again would know, somewhere out there in the galaxy, Chuck McKenzie and a planet full of maniacs were watching, waiting, and probably loading a confetti cannon filled with shrapnel. Just in case.